It's been called direction and control, also form or system.
Sometimes it's even been called organization or machinery, and it's even been defined as a complex of institutions.
Here's a hint. We all live under one. Do you know what it is? Hi, I'm Sid. Welcome to Democracy Rules. If you guessed government, you are right. In the United States, the government is a democracy. But what does that mean to you and me? Let's see what some of you have to say.
Hi, I'm Shavela. I'm out here to find out what some of you think about living in a democracy.
I believe that the best thing about living in a democracy is that we get to choose who's in power. We get to choose our lives, what courses we're going to take in college, things of that nature.
I think it's the symbol of freedom.
With lots of choices and finding out what the people really want and need.
Living in a democracy, to me, would be able to have rights to free speech, free press, and the ability to express yourself openly.
A democracy is a way of living where you have the choice to choose who's going to govern you, where you want to live, who you're going to be, the decisions to run your own life.
Lots of interesting thoughts. But what's the whole story? What is a democracy? Well, we've got some experts in our group, starting with Senator Les Miller. Let's go check in with him. Senator?
Thanks, Sid. With me today is Michael Allen, Professor of Law at Stetson University's College of Law. Professor Allen, thank you for being with us today. I appreciate it very, very much. What drew you into constitutional law?
Well, I was always interested in American history and politics. And one of the things that's so interesting about American constitutional law is it's not about what happened in 1787 when the Constitution was drafted. It's about what's happening today and what's going to happen when my kids are my age and I'm not even around necessarily anymore with them. Because the Constitution was something that started, but then sort of guided all of us for all of this time. Even with all its imperfections, it's endured for over 200 years. And I think it was a great opportunity to try to make people excited about something that some people might just see as a dusty old document sitting in a vault somewhere in Washington.
But you said that it makes a difference today, but do you find the differences that you think that when the Constitution was written back so many years ago, does it have that same effect today as it had back then? Does it still meet the needs of this country?
I think it does, and I think it's stronger. I mean, if you look at early documents shortly after the Constitution was drafted, the United States is referred to as they. Today, of course, we wouldn't do that, right? Because the United States is a single country, it's an it. And so the attitude about the United States as a nation is so much different today. In 1787, the Constitution, even with all its wonderful things, contemplated slavery, for example. Mm-hmm. But even with that horrific gnawing problem in the Constitution, it endured over time. And now we have equality provisions in the Constitution, which makes it better, in my view, than it was in 1787.
Let me ask you something here. The state of Florida, many, many times, and we'll have this upcoming election, changes the Constitution quite rapidly with a number of amendments. Do you think that that opportunity should happen with the United States Constitution? Should we have that opportunity to change it as rapidly as we change state constitutions?
Oh, that's a hard question. The Florida Constitution, you're right, changes all the time. I love animals, but the Florida Constitution protects pregnant pigs. I would hate to see pregnant pigs in the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution, we've had 27 amendments in over 200 years. Mm-hmm. And so maybe the best way for the Constitution to change is the way it's changed principally, which is a gradual interpretation of the document in the context of the times in which we live.
Right. So what do you find is the most misunderstanding part about democracy and the democratic form of government in this country?
Well, I think that people always assume that the United States in some measure has a direct democracy. All forms of democracy, the key element is the power comes from the people. so the people retain the power. But in a direct democracy, the people would vote on everything. And so we have elements of direct democracy, Florida's referendum and constitutional provisions, for example. But by and large, in the United States, we have indirect democracy, or a Republican form of government, in which we elect representatives like you to go to Tallahassee in that case, and you make laws for us. And you don't just do that by taking a poll of your constituents and say 51% say this, so that's the way I'm going. We've entrusted to you the opportunity to make these government decisions. And in fact, the Constitution secures to the states a Republican form of government, not a direct democracy. And so that, I think, is the most common misunderstanding about American democracy, is that it's actually a Republican democracy.
There's been talk recently of changing part of the Constitution to allow more members of Congress, because they think that the congressional members we have in Washington are just not enough. What's your thought process on how that would take place?
I don't think that would be a particularly good idea. I think that 435 members of the House of Representatives is a lot. And the bigger the group gets, the less deliberation that's going to go on between and among the members. And so I think that there's something important about keeping that way.
Thank you, Professor Allen. Let's go back to Sid now and get some more background information.
Thanks, Senator. Our government today is a strong example of democracy at work. But the concept actually had its roots in the very country that the Pilgrims left in protest. I'm talking about England, the Magna Carta, and Bill of Rights. These two documents were milestones in the beginnings of democracy.
Let it be known that this, our Magna Carta, our great charter, does establish that the power of the monarchy is not absolute. Furthermore, that it grants to the subject of King John the fundamental rights of life, liberty, and property.
Actually, the Magna Carta says more than that, so I've logged on to the National Archives to see for myself. By reading the whole document, it's easy to understand why this was a big step along the road to democracy. Later, in 1688, the English Bill of Rights established authority for Parliament and included personal guarantees, such as the right to a fair trial. These are the ideas about rights that the settlers brought with them.
What other rights and privileges did the settlers want?
The English colonies in the New World quickly wanted total freedom. After the start of the Revolutionary War, they chose Thomas Jefferson and 4 other men to create the Declaration of Independence in 1776.
Fast forward, the Declaration of Independence was written in less than 3 days, and that's a fact.
Making this declaration was a really bold move, but it was the people's choice for their future.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
I'm online now at ourdocuments.gov to look at the Declaration of Independence. The preamble or introduction states what the people wanted and why. Basically, they wanted freedom from all control by England. Maybe more importantly, it also established what the writers saw as their natural rights.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
With those words, the colonies were on the road to independence. Let's check back in with Senator Miller for some thoughts on the importance of the Declaration. Senator?
Gauging the importance of the Declaration of Independence, that's a tall order, Shavila. Professor Allen, what makes this document so important today?
Well, there's really 2 things. I mean, one is very practical, which is the balance. A huge part of the Declaration is actually an indictment against King George III of England and explaining why, in fact, we're going to be independent as the United States. But really the biggest importance is that it sets out these very important values that continue to underlay much of what we think about America. It says that the Declaration says all men are created equal. And of course, at the time, it wasn't just men that were created equal. It was all white landowning men that were created equal, of course, in terms of the Declaration. But the idea was that principle that a class of people were the same, that they had rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the rights came not from the government, but the document says the creator, but somewhere other than the government, and that we didn't give those rights up by simply having a government. I mean, those principles are ones that if you ask people on the street, in the abstract, they're going to say, yeah, of course that's right. I've got these rights. I didn't give them up from the government. George Bush didn't give me them. Bill Clinton didn't give me them. Those principles still ring true to us today.
Well, do you think that the average person in this country really feels that those rights are theirs within whatever they may have in their inner being? Is it relevant today?
I think it is relevant. I think that the question about whether everybody thinks they have these rights, I think they do. I think that that's one of the driving forces in America, is that we actually believe that because we're born here and we're Americans, we have rights. Whether everybody feels today that their rights are being respected, that's another question. But of course, that leads back to the fact that if you feel like your rights aren't being respected, it's because you think you've got the rights in the first place. And so I think that even though the Declaration is not a binding document, I mean, you can't sue in court to enforce the Declaration of Independence, it in many sense binds Americans together in these very basic principles that Thomas Jefferson pretty much wrote by himself when he was only 33 years old.
So why should students today even care about the Declaration of Independence?
Well, you know, it sounds corny, but it makes us who we are. I mean, there was this movie that was out recently, and there's a follow-up, National Treasure. And of course, the premise of that was written on the back of the Declaration of Independence was a treasure map. But you know, they didn't pick the Declaration of Independence by accident in setting up that movie. They picked it because it's a document that has this central ring. People know the phrase, right? All men are created equal with certain inalienable rights. They can't be taken away. And I think that's a really important thing for people because it unites us in many senses as Americans.
You teach constitutional law at Stetson College of Law. Do you think it's vitally important to start teaching constitutional law, the Declaration of Independence, and the importance of that document to students in high schools, even maybe back in even junior high school?
Absolutely. Because, you know, in many senses, you know, there's the old saying that you can't tell where you're going unless you know where you're from. and with the Declaration of Independence, I mean, think about it. We celebrate not the day that the Constitution was ratified. We celebrate the day that the Bill of Rights was, rather the Declaration of Independence was ratified on July 4th, 1776. I mean, that is the date on which the United States became the place in which we live.
A document that's 200 years old is just as vitally important today as it was the day it was written. That's absolutely remarkable that we're that way. Don't you feel that way?
It is, and I say, I've got 2 kids, and I say to them all the time, even with all the problems that we might have in the United States, we are all so lucky to have been born here, and a lot of that comes from these very basic principles that were so evident in 1776 and are just as important today.
Thank you, Professor Allen, for those comments. You see, Shavila, the Declaration of Independence is still important to us on many different levels.
It sure is, Senator. The Declaration of Independence was an excellent start, but the growing country needed something more defined and permanent. They needed a structure of government. Let's look at what came next. Hi, Ms. Phillips.
Hi, Shavela.
We're working our way through the founding documents for the United States. Can you help us with the Articles of Confederation?
Sure.
Well, what we need are the basics, the when, the why, and the what.
The date was 1777, after the colonists declared their independence. They realized they needed something to bind them together to work as a group.
Okay, what did the Articles of Confederation accomplish then?
Well, it was a basic agreement for the states to work together for common defense and security of liberties. It was a good idea, but it was loosely structured and basically powerless.
Well, thanks for the fast synopsis. See you later. You'll see it didn't take them long to realize they needed something better.
What do you think caused the new states to be so hesitant to create a strong new government?
Okay, the colonies declared their independence, then created a government that didn't really work. So what was next? Well, in 1787, they created the Constitution. What made this plan work? Let's talk again with Senator Miller. Senator?
That's a good question, Sid. Professor Allen, what do you think were the major problems that our founding fathers were trying to solve with the Constitution?
Well, really two. I mean, the first one was we look back at the Constitution today and assume that these people waltzed into Philadelphia in 1787 with this air of we're going to be an inevitable success. Remember, they were coming from a period of abject failure. They'd set up the Articles of Confederation, which we heard about, which were a total disaster for American government. They didn't work. And so the framers, number one, were coming in to try to set up an effective form of government. And they weren't doing it from a position of cockiness because they'd been failures. At the same time, the framers were so terrified about government itself. So at the same time they wanted an effective government, they had to make sure that they structured a government that wasn't so powerful or effective that it trampled on the rights of the people. So they were trying to parry these two things, an effective form of government and protecting individual rights.
Were there any pertinent issues? I mean, we were trying to make an effective government, not a very powerful government, probably a government that was for the people, by the people. But were there any pertinent issues that you felt that they were having to deal with?
Well, the central issue that they had to deal with the government was the fact that the government under the Articles of Confederation required for almost anything important either a supermajority of the states or unanimous consent of the states itself. And the government just didn't work. States were fighting with one another, in New York versus New Jersey, et cetera. And so that was the central goal, is to try to make a national government that could work.
So does the Constitution still have those issues to deal with that they did back then?
Absolutely. They come up in different ways, but all we need to do is think about all of the litigation that's been coming out about the war on terrorism. Yeah. Right? Those cases deal with exactly the two same issues that the framers were concerned with in 1787. How do we have a form of government that's effective, okay, here protecting the United States against a real threat of terrorism, at the same time without undermining the freedoms and individual liberties that make America what it is. Those are the same types of issues that they were dealing with in 1787. We're just dealing with them today with Stinger missiles and nuclear weapons. It's just a different set of facts with the same problems.
I'm putting myself in the place of a student. So you're really saying, and I hope that the Constitution is just as relevant in 2008 as it was back the day that they were putting this whole document together.
Absolutely. In fact, in some ways, it's more relevant. Remember, in 1787, it was new. We didn't know what these things were. Today, imagine, assume that you don't like President Bush. No matter how much you don't like President Bush, there's just no question that in January 2009, President Bush is going to step down. There's not a question in anybody's mind that he's going to call up the military and say, I'm going to be king and president forever, no matter what you think of him. And why do we think that way? Because we are all committed to the Constitution and that basic idea of the form of government that we have that works.
Some people refer to the Constitution as a living document. Do you feel that way?
You know, I think if what you mean by that is that it means whatever we want it to mean at any given point in time, I don't think that can be. But if what we mean by that is there are parts of the Constitution that have to be applied to brand new factual settings, and we can't apply them simply by saying what would the, as some people say, the old dead white guys in 1787 would have done, then it's got to be a living document. And no matter how controversial that is, we constantly are trying to apply the document to brand new settings that the framers of the Constitution could never possibly have imagined.
So it is still a document that lives on through centuries and getting the job done.
Absolutely.
Professor Allen, thank you so very, very much. We appreciate that. Said both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are amazing documents, more than 200 years old, and they're still a part of our everyday lives.
Thanks, Senator. The Constitution has been our country's guiding document for more than 200 years. Let's look at its basic principles and structure and see why it works so well.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
It took a while to get to the point of writing those words. Two main plans were proposed, the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan, but no one could agree on either.
At ourdocuments.gov, you can look at both plans. The main disagreement was state representation in Congress, specifically how to determine the number of representatives from each state.
All government, indeed every human benefit and enjoyment, every virtue, and every prudent act is founded on compromise and barter.
And that's exactly how the conflicts were resolved, by compromise. Specifically, the Connecticut Compromise or Great Compromise, which proposed 2 houses of Congress with equal representation in the Senate and representation based on population in the House, just as it is today. There were many more compromises before it was over, so many that the Constitution has often been called a bundle of compromises.
Things are not all black and white. There have to be compromises. The middle of the road is all of the usable surface. The extremes, right and left, are in the gutters.
The Constitution was built around 6 basic principles. They are popular sovereignty, limited government, separation of powers, checks and balances, judicial review, and federalism. The document itself is actually pretty short, only about 7,000 words. There's the preamble that you heard earlier and 7 numbered sections called articles.
Here's a great interactive site all about the Constitution, constitutioncenter.org. You can look at each article in detail, but here are the basics. 1 through 3 define the branches of government, Congress, the President, and the federal courts. Article 4 defines the relationship between states and between state and national government. 5 explains the process for formal amendments. Article 6 declares the Constitution as the nation's supreme law, and 7 outlines the ratification process.
Ratification, to approve and sanction formally.
The group who wrote the Constitution included James Madison, who was called the father of the Constitution. These men realized that whatever they created had to be rigid but flexible in order to last through time. That's why they included Article 5, which lets change happen by amendment. Speaking of change, less than 3 years after the Constitution was ratified, 10 amendments were added all at once. Collectively, they're known as the Bill of Rights, and they outline important freedoms that we still enjoy today, such as freedom of religion, speech, and the press, as well as the right to a fair and speedy trial. But that's not all the Bill of Rights ensures. You can look at the whole list at billofrights.org.
Since the Bill of Rights, there have been only 17 additional amendments to the Constitution. The only repealed amendment was the prohibition of alcohol. And that's a fact.
It took a lot of people hundreds of years to refine the democratic government that we have today. Let's check back in with Senator Miller one more time so we can get a perspective on democracy today and how we can fit in. Senator Miller?
Thanks, Shavila. We've learned a lot today about the founding documents of American democracy and the freedoms and rights that they guarantee us. Professor Allen, what is the role of citizens in a democratic government?
Well, it's critical. Without citizens taking a part in democratic government, there isn't democratic government. And so people need to care, first of all, it strikes me, and not just care in the abstract about things like the Constitution as a piece of paper, but care about one another. Because if you start by caring about your community members, people at your school, the people in your churches and synagogues and places of worship, that's the first building block, because if you care about the people around you, that's what government is meant to protect. And then you have to do what you're doing now, watching television, meaning you got to educate yourself. You got to know what the Constitution means, the Declaration of Independence means. You have to know these things. And then the last thing is, and it sounds foolish, you got to vote.
tell these students the importance of being involved in voting, looking at every aspect of government, be it local, state, federal, and the candidates, and even considering being candidates themselves? How important is that for these young people to start thinking in that line?
Well, you know, in the abstract it's important because it's one of the few duties in my mind that we have in a democratic society is to go out there and vote. And we have the beauty in the United States that when we go out and vote on those Tuesday mornings, we don't have to worry about getting shot or killed. Think about the people around the world that will brave physical danger to exercise that right. But on a purely selfish level, if you're running for office, as you know when you did, if you have a group of people who you know are going to vote, that's going to be important to you. And so from an individual's perspective, whether it's the right thing to do or it's the sort of instrumentalist thing to do, that's what we should do. And as I often tell people, the last way to think about it is, if you don't vote, you can't complain about what happens afterwards.
And as young people should learn, you cannot take voting for granted.
Absolutely not, as so many people in this country really know.
Yeah, I remember when South Africa, apartheid was abolished, people stood in line for over 12 hours to vote, and it's so much easier to do it here in this country, and we should make sure that our young people understand that. Professor Allen, thank you so very much for being here. You've been enlightening to the students on what the importance of the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Again, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Sid Shavila, back to you.
From the Magna Carta to the Constitution, we've sure come a long way, and I'm glad we did. How about you?
Remember, democracy rules, and you rule in a democracy. See you next time.
Democracy rules!